and welcome. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay and you're watching Reformers and Rebels, a show that brings you the most influential leaders from across the world who have ushered change, shaped history and inspired many. In an increasingly polarized world, watch these leaders share ideas, discuss challenges and present perspectives. And today we have with us one of Palestine's tallest leaders, Hanan Ashrawi. From being an English professor to representing Palestine in the West Asia peace process, Hanan Ashrawi has seen a meteoric rise through the ranks. Born in 1947, Hanan was an active student politician who was then mentored by Palestinian thinker Edward Said. She went on to breach a male bastion by getting selected to the Palestinian Legislative Council. And soon enough, she became one of the most prominent women figures in Arab politics. She's not just been present at high-powered meetings in Madrid and Washington, but has also arranged for secret meetings between the PLO and Israel.
In 2002.
Ashrawi remains an outspoken activist for democracy, human rights and the Palestinian cause. Hello.
Hello, Palki. How are you?
I'm good, and thank you for joining us here on WION on this very special episode of Reformers and Rebels. My first question to you is, there's a lot of change, if that's the right word, in the India, Israel, Palestine equation.
Yes.
Your president visited India some time back, and this visit, interestingly, was compared to the 1992 visit by Yasser Arafat.
Yeah.
One of his most challenging ones.
No, well, the visit by President Mahmoud Abbas was actually one that he really valued. He felt it was a very special visit, and he felt that he was well received, and that they had signed agreements, and that he had assurances. Because historically, Palestinian-Indian relations have always been not just positive, not just friendly, but there's a genuine sense of identification and solidarity, which was highly appreciated by the Palestinians as a whole, not just by the leadership. Then gradually people began to feel that India, after '92 and so on, began drawing closer and closer to Israel, and Israeli-Indian relations were redefined in ways, particularly in security terms and the purchase of sophisticated weapons and so on. And India became one of the major importers of Israeli weaponry. And therefore there has been a change in the, let's say, political discourse at the high level, which people didn't like. But we still, I think, the Palestinian people as a whole believe that the Indian people, in general, remain not just sympathetic, but have a greater understanding of the Palestinian condition, the Palestinian situation.
When you talk about people, I understand that in the 70s and 80s there were up to 5,000 Palestinian students studying in India. Now there are barely 100.
Yes.
So what has happened? What has changed?
What has changed is that the official policy of India has shifted, and the influence of Israel is tangible. And the relations, whether it's economic or security or military, have been enhanced. And so, as usual, Israel tries to sideline the Palestinian issue. Israel tries to create new relations with countries, knowing that India did not have relations with Israel for a long time, at the expense of the Palestinians, and tries to draw people into a political position that is quite detrimental to the chances of peace. But I think what happened is that once the relations started, there was a rapid intensification and upgrading of relations at all levels. But primarily what really concerns us is how India is importing so much weaponry from Israel.
The whole world is. No.
The whole world is, because Israel, yes, has access to American technology, American know-how, and billions of American support for its military-industrial complex, so to speak. But that doesn't excuse the fact that nothing happening with Israel is unconditional. Israel always gets a political price in return, gets also returns having to do with whether voting or special relations or undermining Palestinian rights. But I wouldn't go so far as to say India has undermined Palestinian rights or has withdrawn from its relations with Palestine. But it's not as intimate and secure as it used to be because of Israeli engagement and, of course, because of certain ideological changes. Israel is a country that now this government in particular is an extreme, hardline, right-wing, racist government. And it uses the language of ideology and hyper-nationalism and religious absolutism and so on, which is not our language. And therefore it tries to forge relations with other countries relying on such an ideological approach.
It's interesting that you draw that parallel. Many have also compared the current day Israel to the South African apartheid regime.
Yes.
How much does that help?
Actually, the South Africans tell us that the apartheid in South Africa was not as bad as it is here because there wasn't an attempt to totally displace a whole nation and replace it with others. There was an attempt at domination, separation, and discrimination. But here you do have domination, you do have control, you do have a situation of tremendous suffering, military occupation that is entirely unjust. But at the same time, you have what Ilan Pape calls a situation of displacement replacement. They want to negate the very existence of a whole nation, our history, our culture, our identity, our rights, and replace it with another. And that's why it's extremely, not just painful, but ominous for the Palestinian people. That's why we believe we are extremely possessive of our history, of our culture, and of our rights, because Israel, as an occupying power, is seeking to create a fraudulent reality, is seeking to gain legitimacy for its occupation and for its takeover of all of Palestine, when we know Israel was created as part of a colonial enterprise by the British and the international community in 1947-48. It wasn't a country, and it was superimposed on Palestine. And now it's attempting to take control of all of historical Palestine, even though we said that we will accept Israel on 78% of historical Palestine, provided they leave us the 22% it occupied in 1967. Even that is not enough.
I was talking about what Ilan Pape has said, and I'll quote again. One of the criticisms of the Palestinian movement is that the absence of clear, representative and effective institutions has forced activists to operate in a leadership vacuum. People in Palestine are not on the same page on how to take this forward.
Oh yes, we do have some serious internal problems and issues. First is the issue of the division, and this division is quite detrimental to Palestinian rights, to our standing globally, and to our relations with an international solidarity movement, let alone domestic activism. This is one, yes. We haven't had elections in some time. Our whole political system needs to be reactivated, revitalized, and re-legitimized. We understand the occupation is a very detrimental factor in our lives. The problem is most of the world was happy to tell us, okay, you go and deal with nation building and have efficient, accountable, transparent institutions, and yet without any progress in terms of peacemaking, while maintaining the Israeli stranglehold, control.
Can the two not be exclusive of each other?
No, I think they're interdependent.
How so?
You cannot have nation building while you're enslaved by a cruel military occupation, because there's a limit as to how far you can go. Since you don't control your own land, you don't control your own resources, you don't control entry or exit points, you don't even control building on your own land. You have no way of protecting your own rights, human rights and fundamental freedoms, because this is a system of tremendous injustice and control. It permeates every aspect of your lives, and it doesn't leave you any room to act. So there are limits as to how far you can go, and we as Palestinians have built institutions. We have built economies even under the control of Israel. We have tried very hard to have a system that functions.
Is this hypocrisy of the international community, according to you, not just restricted to the West? It seems that your Arab allies too are now, you know, the focus is more on isolating Iran than on holding Israel accountable, and to that extent it's the Palestinians who are suffering.
That's right. The regional context is not very encouraging either. I mean, it has always been very difficult, but we have always seen ourselves as part of the Arab world. We are not separate, and we do need that, because we do not need to be decontextualized also. We are part of this region, we have a long history, we have a long culture, we have always been part of the Arab world, even though we do have a distinct national identity as Palestinians. But unfortunately, things have been getting worse with the Arab Spring, with the rebellions, with the, even before that, with the invasion of Iraq. What's happening now is that it wants what it calls the outside-in approach. Let's make peace with the Arab world. Let's normalize with the Arab world, thereby transforming the Palestinian issue into a domestic issue in Israel. Not an issue of self-determination, independence, and statehood, but an issue under Israel's control. And then it will get all the rewards at once, which is what the Americans are trying to do also, in the sense that they're following the pattern of get Israel diplomatic recognitions, like India recognized Israel after we went to talks in '91. And this was one of the rewards.
Why do you think the '91 talks did not work? Is one of the reasons that no one took into account the repatriation of the refugees?
The refugees is one aspect. '91 talks did not work because Israel refused to deal with the real issues. It wanted to deal with the functional, technical, procedural issues and postpone the core issues, not just the refugees, but the borders, Jerusalem, security, water, all these, postpone them for later phases, permanent status talks, and yet deal with the functional approach, administrative approach. So it wanted to create a system whereby the Palestinians can, as they say, run their own lives, but maintain the occupation in place. It led to a situation where from 100,000 settlers, now we have close to 700,000 settlers, illegal settlers in Palestine, where it is in control. For example, 60% of the land is designated Area C. Israel doesn't allow the Palestinians to act in Area C, but has been busy ethnically cleansing Area C and bringing in settlers as well as economic enterprises within Area C. The same thing with Jerusalem. Israel illegally annexed Jerusalem, changed the parameters and borders of Jerusalem, planted settlers in the heart of Jerusalem, surrounded it with 3 rings, settlements, military checkpoints, and the horrific apartheid wall. So it has been busy doing everything under the guise of the process. There are talks.
Is status, when they say this is status quo, is it actually status quo? Or
There's no status quo. Israel has unilaterally been changing it. Systematically, and now we see a massive escalation where it has not just annexed Jerusalem and changed its character, it has managed to create settlements, illegal settlements, not just in what it calls the settlement blocks or clusters, which we believe are also illegal, but also in the heart of the West Bank, everywhere. So it would be almost impossible to remove these settlements. And we believe all settlements are illegal. It's not enough to say you have to stop settlement activities, you have to start the process of dismantlement of settlements, because the land does not belong to Israel. And it is a violation of international law, international humanitarian law. And according to the Madrid Statute, to the Rome Statute, it is a war crime, according to the Fourth Geneva Convention. So Israel is, before the eyes of the world, is seen as being guilty of committing war crimes.
But who is holding Israel accountable?
Nobody.
The West talks about right to return in every other context, but it seems in the Palestinian context they do not talk about it. Someone said, and I'll quote again, the peace process is a misnomer. It had nothing to do with peace. It was a search after a comfortable capitulation by the native people of Palestine based on the wish to appease Israel without irritating it too much.
Absolutely. Who said that? That's a brilliant quote.
I think it was Ilan Pape again.
Ilan Pape, yes. It is a brilliant quote. It is true. There was no intention of peace whatsoever. It's a situation of manipulation of the international community, buying more time to create more facts, generating a whole system of myths and disinformation and racist lies and labeling and stereotyping against against the Palestinian people, and then trying to get as much in terms of, as we said, payments and rewards and positive inducements in order to show that it is interested in peace, while buying more time to undermine the essence of peace, the most basic requirements of peace, and of course Palestinian rights. And it is now busy browbeating the whole international community. Look at what it's doing at the UN, for example. Yeah. I think Nikki Haley is originally Indian, right?
Yes.
It's going around that. She's going around, you know, threatening, putting pressure on countries, scolding people publicly, like, you know, the Human Rights Council.
But Donald Trump's visit did not go as well as the Israelis were hoping. Did you follow what happened?
Look, yeah, I followed Donald Trump's visit. Donald Trump seems to think that he can make the ultimate deal. Yeah, this is a bit more complex than a business deal, let me put it frankly, because there are lives at stake. There's the essence of your existence, your identity, your history, your culture. It is being usurped. It is being subordinated. And Israel has not just acted with full impunity, but with full support. So it has reached the level where it thinks that it can manipulate the world, where it can dictate to the US what it should do, and to Europe even. So the question is not wanting to make a deal, it's understanding that any kind of agreement has to be based on international law, on a minimal level of justice, on a recognition of equal rights for the Palestinian people. And of course, having a clear objective of what you want, and a clear blueprint, a clear plan of how you get there, and within a binding time frame, and of course with a strong presence or engagement for accountability, monitoring and verification, to hold those who violate the requirements of peace accountable, and to have, as I said, a system of arbitration and a binding time frame. Otherwise, you end up on an endless, drawn-out process without substance, without impact on reality, and without any effect on Israeli behavior.
But it's not just Donald Trump, it seems. Successive American presidents have shown this confidence. Barack Obama said in 1 year's time we will have you know, a peace deal. They were talking about the roadmap to peace and so on and so forth. Do American presidents not understand the situation, or do they overestimate their ability to influence both sides?
I think Israel is a domestic issue in the US. It's not just a foreign policy issue. Israel makes and breaks political career in the US through AIPAC and other pro-Israeli lobbies. I mean, also the evangelicals in the US and the pro-Israel organizations, institutions that have enormous impact. Look at Congress. I mean, they deal with Netanyahu in a way that they would never deal with their own president. They sided with Netanyahu against Obama, as you know. And so in many ways, they look at things through the eyes of what's good for them individually in their campaigns. How much campaign funding do they get? How much campaign votes do they get? How much exposure to the media do they get? That's what they care about, rather than an issue where Israel is a foreign country that is violating international law, undermining American standing, American interests, even the American respect throughout the world. But they don't look at it that way. But every American president comes with all these ideals that he or she, no, there was no she, can make peace. And then they bring to bear the strategic alliance with Israel and the domestic needs of their own parties and so on peacemaking. And I know I've negotiated with Americans for a very long time in the context of peace process, and most of the time they were more Catholic than the Pope, so to speak. They cared more for the for Israel than the Israeli delegation did in terms of protecting Israeli rights and what they perceived to be Israel. And they told us very openly, Israel is our very, very special ally, so don't expect us to treat it like any other country. And this ridiculous statement, there is no daylight between us and Israel, this identification. I said, if there's no daylight, then obviously you're both in the dark, because this is not how to make peace.
Yes. But when the US president came immediately after that, we had a statement from the Israeli defense minister who said we are now closer to peace than ever before, closer to a settlement. Within days, it seems there's been a hardening of position amid reports that both President Abbas and Prime Minister Netanyahu will be visiting Washington for a trilateral meeting with Donald Trump next month. President Abbas has said that we are looking at a non-exclusive state of Palestine where there will be no settlers, there will be no, I mean, everyone, all ethnicities, all kinds of people will have rights to go and live and buy homes in areas which are currently under Israeli occupation. Prime Minister Netanyahu, on the other hand, says that those areas will be under Israeli authority. In 2014, he said they can be under Palestinian authority. So it seems they keep going back to square one. Which way is this going?
It's not just square one. It's the fact that everybody is positioning himself. And I think if Trump does not understand, even though he has his people like Jason Greenblatt and so on, and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, but Kushner is supporting settlements, as we all know, and even Greenblatt supported settlements, and Kushner's family. And then you have his ambassador here, David Friedman, who is also a supporter of settlements and the more extreme right-wing elements of Israel. So he has in place a team that is so pro-Israeli that many of them had never met a Palestinian before, knew nothing about Palestine. It's not enough to just say, I want to make a deal. If you don't understand the basis, as we said, and the requirements, and if you don't really understand both sides of the conflict, not just one side, if you don't normally have a history of support for the stronger party and giving Israel cover to act with impunity, then how can you be an even-handed peace broker? That's the problem. They say that much rather, was it Naftali Bennett said the other day, they'd much rather keep all of Jerusalem than have peace with the Palestinians. They don't want peace, they want the land. Mahmoud Abbas has been so malleable, let's say, so accommodating, so moderate, to the point where he has lost support among his own people for being accommodating, for accepting, sort of American dictates or American requests, for trying to act positively even when he's being pressured and threatened.
Because there's a lot of choice.
Because the pattern, you see, that's the thing. The pattern is reward Israel, put pressure on the Palestinians. Threaten the Palestinians, blackmail the Palestinians, but give Israel everything it wants. Maybe it will play ball with you. There's always, this is a mistake. You can never exploit the weakness of the weak and cater to the strength of the strong. If you do not empower the weak, they will never have peace. If you do not recognize inherent human equality, you will never make peace. If you think that politics of power can prevail in peacemaking, you will never make peace. So the thing is, you have to understand that your traditional, you have to unlearn, so to speak, you have been taught all these years, that Israel is not God-sent. Israel is not infallible. Israel is not a country that has to be catered to and spoiled and so on. That Israel is really a source of massive instability and insecurity and militarization, not just in the region but beyond. That Israel is carrying out a very cruel enslavement of a whole people, and total control of everything that we have, and the land theft and home demolitions and killing of civilians and so on, and is getting away with it. So the issue is, how do we change this equation? How do we understand that to make peace you need to change this inherited long-term view and this manufactured thing that Israel is good for the US, and therefore we have to maintain this blind support of Israel. What's good for the US is trying to present an image of really being a peacemaker, not just military interventionist, not just browbeating the weak, the Palestinians.
But you know, the Israelis did see the Trump administration as
a savior.
As a savior after 8 years with Barack Obama and the equation he shared with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Look what happened. He visited the Western Wall, and no Israeli leader and diplomat went with him. So we do not really know which way this is going.
That's the thing, because when you spend so much time demonizing Obama, the president who gave you more funds, more support, more military technology than any other government, than any other president of the US, Barack Obama spent 7-8 years trying to prove that he's good for Israel, because they kept accusing him of not being good for Israel, because there's an antipathy between him and Netanyahu. It's not a personal issue. The question was that the US was taken to such extreme positions in its support for Israel, and support for Israeli impunity. It provided Israel with cover every step of the way at the UN. The one time it did not use its veto, it abstained, it was seen as demonic, you know. So in a sense, they managed to pressure Barack Obama to giving them more than any other president, including Republican presidents. And now you have Trump, and they painted him in the other extreme version. So he's the anti-Obama, which of course Trump likes. He's the un-Obama. Everything Obama failed to do, he's going to do. Everything Obama did, they're going to undo. So now he seems to think that he can succeed where Obama failed. And he can do this by being so conciliatory and so on to Israel. It's not going to work. In Israel, they think that Trump is their salvation. He's their savior. He's, you know, the Deus ex machina that descended and is going to really give them everything. They can, you know, annex all the West Bank. You see how much they escalated settlement activity and land theft.
And he told them to go slow on that.
He told them to go slow. They didn't care. But you cannot thumb your nose at Trump the way you thumbed your nose at Obama. There's a difference. And number two, I mean, his whole team is so pro-Israeli. It's incredible, even to the right of Netanyahu. And yet, he is not beholden to the Republican Party because they didn't really choose him. He imposed himself on the Republican Party. He's not beholden to the pro-Israel lobby because they didn't fund him. And most pro-Israelis were against Obama in the States, even though in Israel they were all against Trump, even though they were all for Trump in Israel. So he has that leeway, which no other president had. So I don't know if populism is a source of strength. But in some ways, he's providing Netanyahu also with a model of how to break laws, how to avoid the system, how to manipulate the system. I don't know. But I think that it's a situation that remains largely unpredictable. You cannot take anything for granted. And you have to wait and see whether the institutions within the US will have a role to play, or whether the individual can undo a long history of institutional work.
My final question to you, do you see a role for India in the peace process? Because Israelis are doing business with India, the Palestinians trust India, Iran engages with India, Saudi Arabia is a friend of India.
We don't want P5 alone, we want P5 plus one plus some Arab countries, and we talked about BRICS very openly, because we believe India has to be there. You cannot exclude such a major democracy. And I think the pro-Western bias has really tainted the approach to peacemaking. And we believe that the Indian relationship with the region can play a role. The rising economic power of India can play a role. And I think this exclusive monopoly of the US on peacemaking has been very detrimental to peace. And therefore, I think India can play a role. And that's why the president goes there. That's why Abu Ammar, President Yasser Arafat, had been adamant about India. And I've heard him repeatedly talk about a role for India. We just hope that the Indian government and your Prime Minister would recognize the nature of this special relationship and would not sell it out in exchange for Israeli weapons.
It was a pleasure talking to you, Hanan Ashrawi.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you.